Before you even speak, they've already labeled you in their mind. Your actions may not change this. Yet, there's a hidden pattern in how we perceive others and why first impressions are rarely random. People decide who you are almost instantly, sometimes in milliseconds, based on subtle cues: your tone, posture, facial expression, or even a fleeting glance. This judgment is not always rational. It's emotional, instinctive, shaped by their past experiences and personal biases. Understanding this helps you detach from the pressure of approval and see interactions as mirrors, not verdicts. By noticing their biases, you gain a quiet power. You can choose how to respond, whether to challenge their assumptions or simply move with grace. If this idea intrigues you, pause for a moment. Reflect on someone who's already judged you. What might their reaction reveal about their own mindset, rather than your worth? Hit follow for more insights on reading human behavior. Imagine walking into a room, and before you even speak, before anyone says a word to you, a judgment has already been made. Subtle cues, your posture, your facial expression, the way you walk, have already told someone a story about you. It might be accurate, it might be completely off, but in their mind, a decision has been formed. This is the reality of human perception. People often make up their minds about others almost instantly, long before real interaction begins. It might feel unfair, even unsettling, to think that someone has pre-decided who you are. But the truth is, these first impressions are not entirely conscious. They are shaped by a mix of instinct, past experiences, and unconscious biases. When someone meets you, their brain is working on autopilot, scanning for patterns, cues, and signals that fit their mental map of the world. And the moment they spot something familiar, or something that triggers their assumptions, they assign a label. That label, whether accurate or not, starts to filter every subsequent action you take. Here's the crucial part. Knowing this doesn't mean you're powerless. It's easy to fall into the trap of trying to prove someone wrong or change their mind immediately. The reality is, once a judgment has formed, it's often sticky. Human brains naturally seek consistency. They notice information that confirms their initial impression and ignore what doesn't. This is called confirmation bias. The frustrating part is that no amount of logical argument or explanation always changes it quickly. So, what can you do instead? Awareness is the first step. Recognize that someone's judgment tells you more about them, their fears, their experiences, their expectations, than it does about you. When you internalize this, you gain freedom. You don't have to bend yourself to fit someone else's preconceptions. You can move through interactions with composure, choosing your words and actions thoughtfully rather than reactively. And while a first impression can be lasting, it is not unchangeable. Subtle, consistent behavior over time can reshape perceptions, but it requires patience and strategy. Instead of trying to force immediate approval, focus on authenticity. Let your actions and presence gradually communicate who you truly are. Ultimately, understanding that people often make snap judgments allows you to step back from the anxiety of being under scrutiny. You realize that you are not defined by their labels. You are defined by your choices, your awareness, and the life you actively live. And once you accept that, you can engage with others from a place of confidence, clarity, and calm. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to form instant judgments about you and why others take their time? It turns out, our perceptions follow hidden patterns shaped by evolution, social cues, and personal experience. First impressions are rarely random. They are guided by our subconscious mind, which constantly interprets signals from the environment to make sense of who we are interacting with. When you meet someone new, your brain is quietly scanning for clues. Your facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, even subtle gestures like how you move your hands or how quickly you respond. All of these details are processed in milliseconds. They are then matched against mental templates built from past experiences. In other words, people are not judging you purely in isolation. They are filtering you through a lens created by every person they've ever met, every expectation they've formed, and every fear or bias they carry. This can feel discouraging at first. After all, it may seem like no matter what you do, some people have already decided who you are. But understanding the pattern behind perception gives you insight rather than frustration. For instance, people often project their own assumptions onto others. If they are cautious, they might see hesitation as insecurity. If they are skeptical, they might interpret confidence as arrogance. These judgments reveal more about their internal patterns than they do about your reality. Knowing this opens a door to self-awareness and strategy. You don't need to react defensively or try to control every impression. Instead, you can observe and adapt. You can be mindful of the cues you naturally give and understand the signals others are likely to read. Over time, consistent and authentic behavior can reshape perceptions because patterns are flexible. They can shift, but not instantly. Another fascinating aspect is that these hidden patterns are also universal in some ways. Studies in psychology show that traits like warmth, confidence, and authenticity are almost universally recognized in first impressions. These traits act as shortcuts, helping the brain quickly assess safety and social connection. By consciously cultivating clarity in your expression and presence, you can influence perception in subtle, non-manipulative ways. Ultimately, recognizing that first impressions follow patterns allows you to move with both awareness and ease. You stop taking snap judgments personally and instead see them as reflections of another person's filters and mental habits. And by doing so, you free yourself to interact from a place of calm, intentionality, and authenticity, turning every encounter into a conscious choice rather than a reaction to someone else's assumptions. It's a striking thought. People often decide who you are in just milliseconds. Before you've said a single word, your tone, posture, facial expressions, even something as small as a fleeting glance can set the narrative in someone else's mind. These microsignals carry more weight than most of us realize because the human brain is wired to process social information quickly. Evolutionarily, rapid assessment was critical for safety and survival. Today, it still influences every first encounter we have. This instantaneous judgment is not a conscious process. It happens beneath awareness, in the automatic, intuitive part of the brain. You might smile, frown, shift your weight, or adjust your voice tone without thinking, and these small cues are being interpreted, categorized, and stored in the other person's mind within a fraction of a second. They create an initial impression that then shapes how all your subsequent actions are perceived. Understanding this can feel unsettling at first. It may seem unfair that your value or character is being assessed before you even speak. But the insight here is not to panic, it's to become aware. Recognizing that these judgments are based on subtle cues, often unrelated to your true self, allows you to step back and observe without reacting emotionally. These snap judgments tell you more about the observer's own biases and experiences than they do about your actual character. The fascinating part is that while first impressions form quickly, they are not permanent. Though the initial milliseconds set the stage, consistent behavior over time can shift perceptions. If someone initially misreads your intent or energy, repeated authentic actions can gradually reshape their understanding. This is why self-awareness matters so much. Being mindful of your tone, posture, and expressions is not about pretending or performing. It's about consciously aligning your presence with who you truly are. Moreover, this understanding creates an opportunity for clarity in communication. By controlling what you can, your presence, your voice, your expressions, you reduce the chance of being misunderstood. At the same time, by recognizing that others are constantly filtering you through their own experiences, you can release the pressure to be universally accepted. Not every snap judgment reflects reality, and not every perception requires validation. In the end, realizing how quickly people form opinions allows you to act with both intention and calm. You can present yourself authentically, knowing that while first impressions matter, they are just the starting point of a much longer story. And by observing both your cues and the responses of others, you gain insight into the subtle interplay between perception and reality, between what is seen and what is true. It's easy to assume that when someone judges you, it's a rational process, but the truth is far more complex. Most judgments are emotional and instinctive, not logical. The human brain is wired to respond quickly to social signals, often before conscious thought even kicks in. This instinctive reaction helps people navigate their world efficiently, but it also means that their conclusions about you are heavily influenced by their own past experiences and biases. Think about it. Every person you meet carries a unique mental library of experiences. Their early upbringing, relationships, successes, and failures, all of these shape how they perceive others. A small gesture or word that seems neutral to you might trigger an emotional response rooted in their history. Perhaps a tone of voice reminds them of someone they distrust, or a gesture recalls an experience of disappointment. In milliseconds, they draw conclusions that feel intuitive and true to them, even if they have little to do with your actual character. This explains why some people make snap judgments that feel unfair. Their conclusions are filtered through layers of personal bias and emotional memory. They are not necessarily evaluating you objectively. They are interpreting you based on the mental and emotional framework they carry. Recognizing this can be both liberating and empowering. It helps you understand that their judgment is not an absolute reflection of who you are. It's a reflection of their own mind, their experiences, and sometimes their fears. So how should you respond? The first step is awareness. Understanding that most judgments are emotional rather than logical allows you to detach from them. You don't need to internalize every opinion or let it define your self-worth. Instead, you can observe these responses, learn from patterns, and adjust where it serves you without losing authenticity. The second step is patience. Emotional judgments may linger longer than rational analysis, but consistent, genuine behavior gradually shifts perception. Over time, people often adjust their initial impressions, especially when repeated actions contradict their first emotional response. Finally, this insight encourages empathy. When you realize that a person's judgment is shaped by their past, it becomes easier to interact without defensiveness. You can approach conversations with curiosity rather than anxiety, seeking to understand rather than simply respond. In the end, the judgments others form quickly and emotionally are not permanent verdicts. They are snapshots filtered through the lens of personal experience. By recognizing the emotional and instinctive nature of perception, you gain the ability to navigate interactions with awareness, authenticity, and calm. You learn to engage with others thoughtfully, responding to their reactions without losing sight of your own truth. One of the most freeing realizations you can have about human interaction is this: other people's judgments are not verdicts. They are reflections, mirrors that reveal more about the person observing than they do about you. When you internalize this idea, the pressure to constantly gain approval begins to fade. You stop tying your self-worth to every glance, word, or evaluation someone makes. Consider this. Each interaction you have is filtered through another person's experiences, biases, and emotional state. When someone reacts to you, positively or negatively, they are responding to a combination of their own mental patterns and the signals you send. Their interpretation is inevitably subjective. Recognizing this allows you to step back and observe their responses with curiosity rather than defensiveness. You see the interaction as information rather than judgment. This perspective transforms the way you engage with others. Instead of trying to control how you are perceived, you focus on authenticity. You show up in a way that aligns with your values and intentions, knowing that external opinions are not the ultimate measure of your worth. By treating interactions as mirrors, you gain insight, which aspects of your presence resonate with others, which signals are misread, and how your behavior can influence perception without compromising your integrity. The benefit of this mindset is profound. Detachment from the need for approval reduces anxiety and fear in social situations. You become less reactive to criticism and more capable of discerning constructive feedback from personal bias. Interactions shift from a stage where you perform to earn validation to a space where genuine communication happens. You begin to understand others better because you're observing their patterns rather than reacting emotionally to their evaluations. This approach also strengthens self-awareness. When you notice someone projecting assumptions onto you, it's an opportunity to reflect. Are these assumptions about you accurate, or do they reveal something about the observer? With practice, this becomes a skill, seeing social dynamics clearly while remaining centered and composed. You learn to choose your responses intentionally, rather than reacting to every snap judgment. Ultimately, seeing interactions as mirrors rather than verdicts creates freedom. It frees you from the constant need to impress, to explain, or to defend yourself. It allows you to move through relationships with calm, confidence, and authenticity. And in that space, not only do you reduce stress and self-doubt, but you also engage with others in a more meaningful, insightful way, understanding both yourself and those around you more deeply. One of the most subtle yet powerful skills in human interaction is the ability to notice biases in others. When you recognize that someone's judgment is filtered through their own experiences, fears, or assumptions, you gain a quiet, almost invisible power. It's not the power to control them, but the power to control yourself, your reactions, your choices, and the energy you bring into every interaction. Every person you meet carries unconscious biases shaped by their past experiences, cultural norms, and emotional history. These biases influence how they interpret your words, gestures, and even your silence. A single action on your part may be seen as confident by one person and arrogant by another. Recognizing this doesn't mean you excuse unfair judgments. It means you understand the landscape before you respond. Awareness transforms you from being reactive to being deliberate. When you see someone projecting assumptions onto you, you have options. You can challenge their perspective calmly and respectfully if the situation calls for it. Or you can choose to move with grace, understanding that their view is a reflection of their mind, not an absolute truth about you. This choice is empowering because it separates your identity from their judgment. You no longer give your power away by trying to change someone's opinion on the spot. Instead, you act intentionally, guided by your own values and awareness. The beauty of this approach is that it reduces conflict while increasing control over outcomes. By observing without immediate reaction, you allow space for clarity. Your responses become strategic rather than emotional. For instance, when faced with criticism or misunderstanding, you can pause, assess the situation, and respond in a way that preserves your integrity and dignity. Over time, this measured approach not only protects your emotional energy, but can also influence how others perceive you, subtly reshaping assumptions without force or confrontation. Moreover, noticing biases fosters empathy. When you understand that snap judgments are often projections of someone's own experiences, it becomes easier to respond with patience rather than defensiveness. You begin to see interactions as opportunities for insight rather than battlegrounds for approval. This mindset enhances relationships, communication, and personal resilience. Ultimately, the power gained from noticing biases lies in choice. You choose your response. You choose your attitude. You choose whether to argue, educate, or simply move forward gracefully. By stepping out of reactive patterns and into conscious awareness, you operate from a place of strength and composure, turning the often unpredictable landscape of human perception into a space where you maintain control, quietly, effectively, and with dignity. It's a common misconception that first impressions are permanent. While snap judgments happen quickly and often feel fixed, the truth is that perceptions can shift, gradually, subtly, and intentionally. The key is small, consistent behaviors over time. Even after someone has made a judgment about you, consistent actions aligned with your true self can reshape how they see you. Change is possible, but it requires patience, observation, and awareness. When a first impression forms, it acts like a filter. Every subsequent interaction is interpreted through that filter. If someone initially perceives you as distant, hesitant, or unapproachable, every small gesture of warmth, clarity, and reliability can begin to chip away at that perception. It doesn't happen instantly. Human brains naturally favor confirmation. They notice what aligns with their initial assumptions and often overlook what doesn't. That's why repeated, consistent signals are essential. Consistency is the silent communicator of authenticity. If you demonstrate integrity, thoughtfulness, and respect in your daily interactions, these small cues accumulate. Over time, they create a pattern that is hard for others to ignore. The person who initially misjudged you begins to see you in a new light, not because you proved them wrong in one dramatic moment, but because your behavior reliably demonstrates your true character. This is subtle influence, grounded in authenticity rather than performance. Observation is equally important. By noticing how people respond to different aspects of your behavior, you gain insight into their biases and perceptions, which actions resonate, which are misunderstood. These observations allow you to adjust without compromising your values. You learn to communicate in ways that are both authentic and effective, shaping perception gently and intentionally. Patience is the third ingredient. Changing someone's perception rarely happens overnight. It requires steady, thoughtful engagement. The more you act consistently, the more the initial snap judgment loses its weight. Over time, the person observing you may begin to replace their assumptions with a deeper, more accurate understanding of who you are. The takeaway is empowering. Your behavior has influence, but it is exercised through time, consistency, and self-awareness, not through pressure or argument. By focusing on small, deliberate actions, you gradually transform how others perceive you while maintaining integrity and composure. Snap judgments may happen instantly, but perception is fluid, and with mindful consistency, change is always within reach. Ultimately, the process reminds you that you are not defined by others' first impressions. You are defined by your actions, your presence, and your patience in showing up authentically day after day. Imagine being in a room where someone has already made up their mind about you. It can feel frustrating, unfair, even discouraging. But here's a key insight. Being prejudged doesn't define your reality. It defines the lens through which someone else sees you. Their perception is a reflection of their own experiences, expectations, and biases, not a verdict on your character or worth. Understanding this distinction is where real power lies. Every interaction carries the potential for misinterpretation. When someone evaluates you quickly, their brain relies on patterns and past experiences to fill in the gaps. They notice certain cues and immediately attach meaning, often without conscious thought. A slight hesitation might be interpreted as uncertainty. A neutral tone might read as indifference, and a confident gesture could be seen as arrogance. These judgments reveal more about their internal world than they do about your actions. Recognizing this lens gives you freedom. You no longer have to internalize every opinion, defend yourself against every assumption, or feel pressured to conform to someone else's expectations. Instead, you can observe, assess, and respond with intention. This awareness transforms prejudgment from a limitation into an insight. You can choose when to challenge misconceptions, when to educate through actions rather than words, and when to move on gracefully, conserving your energy for what truly matters. Understanding the lens also sharpens your empathy. You begin to see that snap judgments are not personal attacks. They are reflections of another person's worldview. People interpret reality through their own experiences, fears, and assumptions. Recognizing this allows you to interact with patience, curiosity, and composure. You respond not out of defensiveness, but from a place of awareness and choice. This perspective also reinforces self-mastery. When you focus on your own behavior, your own intentions, and your own growth, external judgments lose their power over you. You maintain control over your energy and presence, ensuring that your reality is defined by your choices rather than someone else's perception. Over time, consistent, authentic actions can influence how others adjust their lens, but the key is that their lens never dictates your truth. Ultimately, understanding that prejudgment reflects perception, not reality, empowers you. You gain clarity, composure, and freedom in every interaction. You learn to navigate human relationships with discernment, responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. And most importantly, you live anchored in your own reality, letting others' perceptions be exactly what they are, a lens, not a definition.